How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Talking Ball. And today I am going to be doing a 2015-16 Duke basketball season review. Yes, I think it's time to look back. I know everyone wants to look forward to Jason Tatum and Harry Giles and Frank Jackson, but let's look back at the season that was and how the Duke Blue Devils were in advancing to the Sweet 16. So let's remember what the expectations were heading into the season. Many people thought one of Sean Obi or Chase Jeter would start over Emile Jefferson or Marshall Plumlee, and that the other one would make significant contributions. And that obviously turned out to be far from the truth. As a matter of fact, both of them really struggled to play. Jeter playing a little bit more than Obi, but really sporadically at that. Then many people thought Derek Thornton, even though he left high school a year early, would come out and play like a lead guard and take the reins there and play the point guard position for Duke. And this didn't happen as well. Yes, he did play more, and it's not to the same extent as Sean Obi and Chase Jeter, but he didn't become their point guard. It was really a combination of Matt Jones and Luke Kennard to an extent, and Brandon Ingram and Grayson Allen, who was the point guard, as well as Thornton, but he didn't become the sole point guard. And when you thought you understood what the team was going to be after 10 games, arguably the most important player at the time, who was averaging a double-double, Emile Jefferson, goes down for the year. So what happened this season with the Duke Blue Devils? Well, Grayson Allen and Brandon Ingram really established themselves as dynamic scoring duo, and I felt like they started off as Allen being the number one primary scoring option and Ingram as the secondary, but as Ingram developed, I felt Allen stagnated, and that was something that was an interesting development throughout the season. He went from this storied, Final Four hero to this villain, and I think it kind of affected his play. I didn't see him develop the same way that he was earlier in the season, when he seemed to be improving game to game after that Kentucky game. Towards the end of the season, when all the tripping things and the media was kind of going after him, it seemed like his play also wasn't as great as it was. Yes, he did have a few great games, especially like the NCAA game against Yale, but overall I felt like his play really didn't accelerate the same rate as Ingram's, who's really improved as the season went on and seemed to be on an upward trajectory that didn't really seem to slow down. Opposed from a small 3-game slump at the end of the season, he really picked it up towards the end of the second half and wasn't a diaper dandy by the end of the year. I felt like Marshall Plumlee really established himself as a good Duke basketball player. It was really questionable the first 3 years whether he would do that, but at times, he was a one-man wrecking crew. He was the general. He could do anything out there. The guy would block shots. He would get double-digit rebounds. He was even able to score close to 20 points at times, which is amazing when you consider the guy really struggled to catch the ball at times in his first couple seasons at Duke. Luke Kennard really demonstrated that he can score points in a hurry at times, but he also showed that he can disappear, and that was one of the themes this season, that no one really was able to give them a consistent scoring threat. Everyone seemed to have their slumps. Even Allen, the way he scores his points is he'll really score them in bunches and then disappear for periods of 8-10 minutes at a time and not score another point. And that really hurts the team. It makes the team have to rely on other sources for scoring. And really, that's Allen's calling card. He's really a score-first guy. He's not going to contribute that much in other areas of the game. Now, how did this season start? Well, they really started off 14-2, and they finished 11-9. And if you look at that, you may think, well, that's a real, obviously the 14-2 start looks great, but they played obviously a much greater slate of competition in those final 20 games than they did those first 16, and they also had Emile Jefferson and weren't dealing with, depth issues, only having 6 to 7 guys, even 5 guys really at times. obviously this season had really many highs and lows, and before the highs, I think there was that stretch of losses that I think you guys, if you can all remember back when they lost at Clemson in a 12-day stretch, really, from January 13th there to the January 25th loss. They lost 4 out of 5, where they lost to Clemson, they lost to Notre Dame at home, they lost to Syracuse at home, then they beat NC State on the road, which is one of the few teams that they seem to have their number as of late, and then Miami seemed to kind of manhandle them in Miami. And that was on January 25th. And from then on, they kind of started to pick it up. Right after that, they won 5 straight games a little bit later when they won at Georgia Tech. Again, they beat NC State at home. Then they beat Louisville at home. Then Grayson Allen's game-winning shot against Virginia, which may or may not have been a travel. And then they won at North Carolina with that great come-from-behind win where they never really gave up. They stayed in the game the entire time. And I think that's what you take from this season, that even though the depth chart wasn't there for them, they didn't have enough players really to compete every night, that they really did give a good effort for the most part this entire season, even though the depth wasn't there for them after the Emile Jefferson injury. So I think if you're a Duke fan, you got to be happy about the Sweet 16 berth. And even though they lost to Oregon and it wasn't the greatest effort, it was a good overall season performance, and you got to be content with them getting as far as they did. Looking ahead, obviously things are much different heading into next season. But stay tuned for individual player season reviews from last season, and then we're going to get into some previews here for the 2016-17 season. Alright guys, thanks for listening. As always, let us know what you want to hear in the comments below, and subscribe.